there's this famous quote, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's like, trying to fit something at the same level of what created it is like a sign of craziness. And what it means by that is, if we're constantly making the same error, adjusting the way in which we look at how the error was made can be a critical piece in unlocking that next level of your performance, because we can maybe understand that the way that we were thinking and feeling in that moment before we made that mistake was the key driver in deciding the outcome of that action. We can grind without realizing or highlighting in that if we're only going to be looking at everything from the physical level, it's like pushing a rock up a hill. But as we start to look at everything as a mind first, our mind opens, our perspectives change. If we change the way we look at things, the way we look at things change. And there's been so many encounters with athletes over the last 4 years where it's just one slight adjustment of changing the way that they viewed something, and it created a whole new paradigm shift in the way that they saw their performances and created monumental results for them moving forward. Hello and welcome. We are here with episode number 1 of the Elevated Athlete podcast. Very much looking forward to getting started. But a tradition that we are going to be doing with each of our episodes is just starting with a couple of mindful breaths. So wherever you are, if you're driving, obviously keep your eyes open. If you're at home, you can shut your eyes. But we're just going to take a nice big inhale now through the nose. Big exhale. One more nice big inhale through the bottom of the belly. And letting it out. You're always one breath away from just feeling a little bit clearer in the mind, and that's why we're going to start each episode with that. So with that being said, we're in episode 1 of the Elevated Athlete podcast, and today's podcast is a solo episode purely to provide a little bit more context and understanding around, what is mental skills and does it apply for you? How can you use it? And look into some of the great athletes in our modern day era who have incorporated mental skills to take their performance to new levels. So why mental skills? You see, growing up, skills are really critical. When you start at an early age, let's say it's 6 or 7, the whole idea is to develop skills. I'm going to use rugby league as an example just because I know that sport the very best, but this can be applied for, all sports, soccer, rugby union, golf, UFC, whatever it may be for your sport. But you got to think that we all need to develop a foundation of skills, whether it's passing the ball, tackling, learning to step, learning to ID different things as you get older from a shape perspective, whether it's in UFC or MMA, learning a punch or a guard of some sort, whether you use jiu-jitsu in your MMA practice. Basically, all I'm saying is we have skills. They're fundamental. They're critical in order to get to a level and a place of competence that we can play pro, okay? Or we can go to semi-pro and inch closer to being pro. Without skills, I'd be lying to say that, you could make it to the very top without a good foundation of skills. So the older you get, what you find is an edge is harder to find because everyone's skill is within a window, within a bracket. If you looked at the top leads around the world, everyone that is signed in that top league has a very, very elite level of skill. And so then what the game becomes is like, what's the difference between the top 30 player or the 30th player in the team and the marquee player? And that's what we want to talk about today is where's that edge and how can we find that edge? So as you get older, pressures mount, you're playing for contracts and your livelihoods, you've got titles on the line, and the external pressure starts to rise. And so what happens is this little kid that was playing in the backyard isn't as free anymore due to the fact that there's more in their external environment. Now, I'm kind of contradicting myself there because we are free. We do have those things inside of our control where we can keep our minds as clear as possible, but we also don't want to deny the fact that there's a lot of external pressures, noises, and a lot on the line as you get older and you move into those top level careers, okay, and as you move into an elite status. So this podcast is simply here to bridge that understanding gap. It's the understanding gap between, okay, I've got a foundation of skills, I'm in the pro or I'm about to be pro. How do I become elite? And looking at specifically the mental skills that the best athletes use and incorporate into their lives and into their practice to go to that very next level. And that's what this podcast is designed to do. And it's designed to do through having conversations with past and present athletes, guests specifically that have knowledge and expertise inside athletic performance, and then also solo episodes where I can sort of jam and on certain topics, or unbundle and talk through certain topics like performance anxiety, or key trends that I'm seeing inside the athletes that I'm working with. So before we get into it, it's important that there's a little bit of understanding of how did I get here? Why am I sitting here talking about mental skills? And I guess what gives me the right to do that. So growing up, I was a massive enthusiast in rugby league and surf life saving. And so I spent a lot of the winter developing rugby league and playing rugby league, and then the summer surf life saving. And thankfully, the background of surf life saving in the summer gave me a good fitness base to then move into rugby league in the winter. And so those were the two key sports that I really wanted to excel in, whether it's going to nationals and competing at a high level in surf life saving, or, whether it's representing the combined independent schools for New South Wales at the Australian Schoolboys tournament for rugby league. Both were pursuits that I was taking quite seriously. Now, when I left school, the goal, because I couldn't see any other career path, the goal was chasing the NRL dream. And so I trained for a full time, basically, the year after leaving school to hopefully realize the dream of playing NRL. Now, what ended up happening in that year is I got an injury, sustained an injury to my knee. And at this point in time, I had to earn money, and I had to also lose some weight. And so what I did was I joined a boot camp by the name of a guy called Andrew Papp. And at the time of chasing this NRL dream, I was also, doing some alternate based trainings, some boot camp style stuff, some grit work, and to develop that side of stuff, to lose the weight that I needed to lose if I was a chance to make the NRL. But it was in this time that I actually fell in love with the fitness industry at the time of getting a knee injury. And so this presented an opportunity where I could, pursue this new passion and this idea in the fitness industry, or, recover the knee and do the rehab on the knee and pursue the NRL career. And I ended up deciding to go down the gym path because I was so excited by it. I lost 22 kilos myself, and I was inspired to want to move into helping people with their health and well-being after the journey that I had been through. And so I started a bootcamp business called DMR, and it was named after my cousin, Damon Mark Roberts, who had a tragic passing. And so I wanted something that meant really had a lot of depth and a reason why behind the brand. And so I started a business called DMR. And so basically over the next 7 years, I ran a gym. And I grew this to, helping over 1,000 people over seven years in the fitness industry. But it was about the 4.5, 5 year mark into the journey where I really started to understand the importance of mindset. I really started to get into personal development, spirituality, mindfulness, meditation. And I started to really understand that it was our mind that was the key block in getting where we wanted to get to in our life, not the physical body. The physical body just played out the role from the commands of the mind. And so I became really fascinated by the mind. And we changed my business partner. I was solo in DMR, and I brought on a business partner for a new gym called Base, which was basically wanting to integrate mind and movement into one and having more of a mental well-being space that focused on physical health, but also incorporated, mindfulness and mindset tools to help people reshape their thinking. And so during this time, I was diving into, working with psychologists, psychotherapists, doing many, many programs and courses, and spending, numerous amounts of funds working with different mentors around the world, from Eastern philosophy, looking into Buddhism, practicing meditation, doing my yoga teacher training, learning about the breath and doing my breathwork certification. And what this allowed me to do was it allowed me to explore all of these curiosities I had in my own way, to seek out mentors and specialists in their own areas, and then to do an 8-week program, to do a 12-week program, to do a 6-month program on these specific topics. And what this allowed me to do in 2021 is a good mate of mine, Nico Hines, you may be aware of him. He's a professional athlete here in Australia in the NRL, National Rugby League. In 2021, he was in Melbourne and he was fighting for a fullback spot. And so we had rekindled our relationship on his debut game. So we sort of parted ways just because he went up north and I was doing my gym stuff. And we bumped into each other on his debut game here on the Central Coast, just down the road from where I am now. And from that moment on, we rekindled our relationship. And from that moment, I started to talk to him on the phone and, we're having conversations and he was asking for guidance and I was able to sort of provide my 2 cents on, what I knew about the mind and, basic stuff at the time. What this allowed me to do is, as Nico transitioned from Melbourne to Cronulla, was I came on full time and started working with Nico, and we made an agreement that we were going to take this mindset stuff seriously as he progressed from being in Melbourne, where the media isn't that bright, and not being one of the biggest names in the team, to being the marquee signing and in a football land in Cronulla, where the media is obviously a lot louder. And so over that year, I worked with Nico full time, and it gave me a big passion for this space. There was many times where I would leave the conversation saying to my fiance, and soon to be wife, that I really love this space. I really feel like I'm connecting to a deeper purpose within myself. And so I ended up closing the gym and backing myself and going all in on this journey. And over this time, I've been able to see many common trends by working with multiple different pro athletes, across many different sports, to see the common trends in, how do these athletes incorporate mental skills into their lives, into their performances, to take them to the new level. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the evolution of mindset. Okay, where does it come from? We can all remember that time when we listened to that motivational video on YouTube, whether it's Eric Jones, I think his name might be, or whatever the guy was for you, whether it was David Goggins more recently, but we've all listened to those motivational, inspirational videos on YouTube. And I think this was a catalyst. If you look at keywords like motivation, grit, resilience, and strength, this was probably, from recent memory, the early adoption of bringing in mind training into the world of sport. And a massive catalyst and pioneer in this space was a guy called Tim Grover, who worked with Michael Jordan, Dwayne Wade, and Kobe Bryant. And if you look at Tim's stuff, and I'm sure Tim has evolved his work over the years, but a lot of his stuff was centered around, grit, resilience. He wrote a book centered around these pieces. But over the last couple of years, and as society has evolved, the understanding of the mind has evolved too. And with this, we've been able to expand our capacity on how we help athletes and how we help people with mindset training, with mental skills. And there's been multiple different niches come off the back of these topics like motivation and grit. And so now we have things like mindfulness, we have breathing, we have meditation. Sports psychology has evolved over the years. And if we look at some more recent people, we looked at the likes of someone like a Phil Jackson, guy in the Chicago Bulls, and a guy called George Mumford, who wrote a book called The Mindful Athlete. And Phil Jackson and George Mumford worked with each other side by side as they developed one of the best sporting teams in recent history or of all time in the Chicago Bulls era with Michael Jordan. And so they started to incorporate, culture connection and mindfulness and like a spiritual connection and bond between the group. And so if we looked at this, again, we've evolved from this motivation-based space to this mindfulness space. And the modern day athlete experiences more external noise than ever before with media, social media. The world is different now to what it was 10 years ago. And so if we look back on more recent athletes on their journey, someone like Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, we can get some clear understandings of, how have some of these great athletes in a really key position and pivotal position in the quarterback role in the NFL, how did they incorporate mental skills? And so I'm going to start with Tom Brady. And so Tom Brady worked with a guy called the late Greg Harden, who passed away just recently. And I wanted to read you out a couple of quotes that Tom referenced doing the work with Greg Harden on his mind and how he took his mindset to the new level. He said, "By giving me the tools I needed to succeed on my own terms, so I could become the best player and person I could be. He rewired my outlook and maybe even my psyche." Okay, psyche, another word for mind. During the football season, one of the biggest priorities was making sure I had the right mental toughness and attitude. Mental toughness is centered and doing the best you can in the present while believing you can do even better in the future. If things go my way, great. And if they don't, that's okay too, since I always have a chance to overcome them in the future. I don't like to focus on negatives or make excuses. I'm never a victim. I gain nothing if I get angry or frustrated. Okay, if I threw an intercept or had a bad day, by saying in that place, I would just making things worse, says Brady. He goes on to say, "I'm not a robot. I'm a very emotional person, but I've learned to use losses as ways to be better the next time. Usually what I learn afterwards through review and self-reflection is a greater positive than whatever benefits might have come from winning." And that was really powerful in listening and hearing that, Tom Brady and how he's using mental skills to speed up his ability to overcome an error and come back to the present moment. I thought that was a key element from that quote or from that reference in an article. If we look at a guy more recently who's in the peak of his career and on his way to greatness, Patrick Mahomes, he also used mental skills, and I'm just going to reference him just quickly now. Patrick was referencing to a guy called Paddy Steinfeld, which is an Australian guy, sports psychologist that works with multiple teams over in the US, and he works with Patrick Mahomes at college at Texas Tech. And Patrick said this: "He used to talk about how your mind can only think about 6 things at the same time. And if you were focusing on the crowd, then you're focusing on how big the game is, then you're not thinking about what coverage is the nickel or the cornerback playing. How's the nickel going to adjust versus the coverage and stuff like that. So I kind of just keep it in that perspective," Mahomes said in this article. And he references here basically focusing on less, staying in the present moment, and how our mind can only absorb so much information at once. And if we're focusing on things we can't control, we're detrimenting our performance, because that means we only have 4 more things in which we can focus on. He also said, "Whenever you're playing, I feel like you don't think about that type of stuff. I think it's going to be cool when I look back and see these big games that I played in. But at the same time, when I'm playing them, I'm not really thinking about how big that game is in that perspective." So looking at 2 pioneers and 2 great athletes in Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes, obviously Tom Brady retired now and Patrick Mahomes going on towards greatness, we can see even from the Michael Jordan era and Tim Grover's work in mental skills and mindset training to more recently Patrick Mahomes, we can see the evolution in how mindset and mental skills has been incorporated with athletes. Now, it's important that we understand, how, and practically speaking, where does mental skills fit in and what can it help? If we looked at things like cultural dynamics, leadership, confidence, pressure, performance, momentum, personal purpose, composure, deciding on contracts, handling conflict, personal life pressures, finding an edge, performance anxiety, better time management, less clutter and overwhelm, mindfulness, self-doubt, overcoming errors. The list goes on and on and on and on. And if we look at another big one, things like not getting picked in teams and not getting selected, and how you can get selected. You see, when we only see something at the action level, we limit our potential. If we only see everything through the body making that punch or the foot kicking that ball, we hold ourselves back of our true potential, because without realizing, it's actually the mind that tells the body to kick. And so if we can look at the first point of contact, which is the thought, which is the mind, and we can train that, then action taken is naturally going to improve itself. Now, we can't respond to an error, but only then review it at the physical and skill level. And what I mean by that is, there's this famous quote, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's like, trying to fit something at the same level of what created it is like a sign of craziness. And what it means by that is, if we're constantly making the same error, adjusting the way in which we look at how the error was made can be a critical piece in unlocking that next level of your performance, because we can maybe understand that the way that we were thinking and feeling in that moment before we made that mistake was the key driver in deciding the outcome of that action. So we can grind without realizing or highlighting and realizing that if we're only going to be looking at everything from the physical level, it's like pushing a rock up a hill. But as we start to look at everything as a mind first, our mind opens, our perspectives change. And the way that we look at things, if we change the way we look at things, the way we look at things change is the quote. And there's been so many encounters with athletes over the last 4 years where it's just one slight adjustment of changing the way that they viewed something, and it created a whole new paradigm shift in the way that they saw their performances and created monumental results for them moving forward. So what's the goal of all of this work? You see, the ultimate goal is, as a byproduct of developing their own minds or your own minds, you're able to go on to be better parents, a better partner, friend, teammate. And because of this, you had a human first buy-in. You see, all athletes are humans before they're athletes. And by acknowledging when we do this work, when we work on our minds, if we approach it from I want to improve myself as a human, the athlete naturally reaps the rewards. But if we look at it as I'm only wanting to do this to improve as an athlete, we really limit our capacity. We really limit our potential. And so the human first approach in developing the human, the athlete naturally gets a benefit as well. So the vision I have is to help athletes break into the next level of status inside their sport so they can increase contracts and, as a function, better provide more opportunities for their families. And so there's 3 types of athletes that I work with, and they all need different support at those levels. There's 3 sections, 3 phases: becoming pro, being a pro, and being elite. The first one, becoming pro, is about right action. It's about specific focus and lifting the day-to-day intensity by knowing what to exactly focus on. It's about how can I, as a full-time job or not quite in the pro world and not quite having a full-time contract, how can I use these small windows of time that I have to really go to the next level? And so it's about right action, right focus, and lifting the day-to-day intensity of our training by knowing exactly what we need to focus on. Now, being a pro and wanting to become elite is different. And if you want to become elite, it's about 3 things. It's about being prepared for every day by having a good recovery, clear focus points, creating more mental space in performances for better action, and not wanting it so bad you overcomplicate. Those last 2 are the biggest ones, is creating more mental space in our performances so the game slows down, the performance slows down, we're able to see things as they happen, and as a byproduct of that, the performance slowing down, we're able to take more optimal decisions, and because we take more optimal decisions, we get better outcomes, and as a byproduct, we get better results. Now, the third bracket is being elite. And so how does someone being elite go to that next level? Working towards greatness is learning to deal with huge external pressure and not letting that drive actions. Okay, I'll say that again. It's about dealing with huge external pressure, but it's not letting that pressure drive the actions that we take. Because if we do that, we're taking actions from an extrinsic place, so from an external place, rather than intrinsically fueled. The other one is not denying your relentless attitude. I think if you looked at someone like Michael Jordan in his Netflix series, The Last Dance, he was cutthroat. He was relentless. And I think, it's a certain breed to be on that level. But I think the biggest thing is the more that you deny that level of relentlessness that you have within you, the more you live in a state of denial, and that's going to suppress your best performance. So I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of non-pros to early pros to multiple Dally M winners, which is the MVP here in the NRL, multiple times in the NRL and the NRLW, and working with 2 national sporting teams. And so in that journey, I've been able to recognize and see consistent trends between what makes someone pro if they're not pro, what makes someone go to the next level if they are a pro, And then thirdly, how do they become great? How do they move into that elite bracket? So I wanted to chat about the elevated athlete vision. So there's and how we get the results that we get using and incorporating mental skills. So there's two key elements that we focus on. The first one is the logical mind, and the second one is the emotional mind. Now, if we look at this is all foundational in mindfulness. So there's a stimulus and a response. And basically what we're doing is we're training the mind to deal with the space between the stimulus and the response. So what I mean by that is something happening, like a mistake, they score, you score, and your response to that. So something happens and then your response to that. Now, in between the stimulus and the response is a space, and this is mindfulness. And as we work on our mind, as we incorporate mental skills and we train our minds, the space between the stimulus and response, it spans, and we're able to insert more optimal decision-making in those spaces that are aligned to our greater self, our values, our goals, and the visions that we have for our life. Because we've trained our minds to have more space between the stimulus and the response. So coming back to the logical and the emotional mind, they feed off one another. Without a clear plan, the emotions are amplified. And without control of emotions, the plan struggles to become executed. So we work through and focus on 5 key systems and foundations as the key pillars to our house. And then, like I say to our athletes, once we have the foundations to the house, we can shape and bedazzle the house and design the house however we like. So there's 5 key things. We worked on the good to great game plan, designed to build a tailored and specific plan for your upcoming 12 months, working on key areas of your development. The next one is the momentum blueprint. Manipulating momentum is an art in sport. When we don't have momentum, how do we regain it fast? And when we do have momentum, how do we maintain it? The third thing we work through is the alter ego advantage. If you looked at athletes, modern day athlete like Justin Jefferson, he talks about it in the quarterback series on Netflix, and the late Kobe Bryant comes to mind when he talks about Mamba mentality. You know, having an alter ego is an edge, and incorporating an alter ego into modern day athletes can be the key thing that takes them to the next level. The third thing that we focus on is the frustrated to focus formula. So how do we go from frustrated to focus fast? How do we make a mistake or overcome an error fast and move into optimal decision making rather than transitioning down into a spiral of frustration and denial and anger? And then our next 5 minutes or next 10 minutes is a representation of just one mistake that we made. So that one is the frustrated to focus formula that we incorporate. And the last one is the slight edge system, turning your 12-month plan into a 6-week focus, into a weekly outline, and then incorporating a thing called the miracle morning. So these are the 5 foundations that we've seen have the best results that allow athletes to build their mindset and mental skills fast and see quick results in their performances, so they can continue to expand upon it and have more of a tailored approach after the foundations have been laid. So the vision is to be all in and not all consumed. All in on your goals, all in on your growth, while simultaneously having a sense of self-worth and identity not tied to your results. This is the massive juggling act, is like, how can you be all in on your goals, but not have it directly correlated with your self-worth, and that ends up impacting your relationships with the ones that you love most. The elevated athlete places emphasis on the thought that produces the actions taken. They prioritize their mentality. Because of their open-mindedness and willingness to explore their own mindset, they were able to reach their potential. This is the elevated athlete. Their potential in sport, but their potential in their life. Chasing greatness in their craft while transitioning into greatness in their life. From the edge found in sharpening their mind, they're able to go on and win titles, new contracts, new endorsements that ultimately not only set them up, but more importantly, set up their families for decades to come. Identifying their personal values, purpose, and curiosities, they were able to move on to meaningful work post-retirement and post-career and continue down the path of greatness in new ventures that light their souls on fire. The elevated athlete have learned to master and witness their constraints and their limits before they transition into poor decision making. So they're able to see the constraints, the limits, but they're able to pattern interrupt, they're able to transition so that it doesn't impact those key moments coming up in their performances. The elevated athlete embraces their humanity while also chasing a standard most wouldn't even fathom. They learn to accept the dance between not doing enough, not good enough, not achieving enough, to doing enough, feeling enough, and being proud of what they've achieved so far. The elevated athlete find the small pockets on the drive home to transition from a training day into being a partner or a parent. The elevated athlete embrace and lean into mindfulness as a mentor to guide them through decision-making under pressure. The elevated athlete encompasses the modern-day athlete who places just as much focus on their mind as they do their craft, because they understand their mind is their craft. And so this is the elevated athlete. And so to wrap this up, if you're wanting to be great as a modern-day athlete, or if you're looking at becoming a pro, then you need to take the mind just as seriously as the body. You need to see them as interconnected. We need to harmonize the body and the mind, because the mind is the command center for the body. The first step to getting started with mental skills is by understanding and recognizing the part of your mind that is holding you back the most right now, which is why we created the 4 athlete mindset profiles, which is a 5-step quiz that allows you to answer specific questions and spits out at the end one of your profiles, whether it's the Zen warrior, the executor, the performer, or the trailblazer. Each of these profiles lists out your greatest strengths and your weaknesses, giving you a step-by-step process and a video training on how you can find an edge and incorporate it fast. If you want to discover your mindset profile and get an instant edge, click the link in the show notes below or head to theelevatedathlete.com.au/quiz. So guys, thank you for joining the first episode of the podcast. This is a breakdown of, the evolution of mindset training, some context and some understanding of, how do we get the results that we get with athletes? But more importantly, hopefully what it allows you to do is spark an understanding and better understand how mindset is important in your evolution as an athlete. I look forward to seeing you with our first guest in our upcoming episode in a fortnight. See you then.